to employ 60s or 1970s or 80s methodologies in 2016. We may have to make some modifications. In our community New Covenant, I teach about common customs, which is a calculative system that's used to precipitate culture. By way of a process of differentiation and integration, we're able to find the value of smaller things and factorials of those equivalents, thus granting us the least adverse effects from the decisions that we make. We have our lessons that are right. The main thing I want us to focus on is the least adverse effects from the decisions we make, and that can only take place through observation. Common customs is a calculative system that precipitates culture. That's very important. Culture is the subconscious mind of the people precipitated by the observation of our predecessors in order that we may be protected from our own ignorance. This means that in Jewish culture, and they have their Sabbath or their Shabbats, and it's customary for them to have their challah bread, they wouldn't have the Jamaican that knows how to jerk chicken sell them the challah bread. But yet this is a spiritual practice that they're observing. But no one would be able to make money in light of this spiritual practice. In fact, you can tell the people that are heavily colonized when they are the only ones that are not the benefactors of the holidays that they celebrate. So when we look at when our people get married, we don't make the suits, nor do we make the rings that we purchase, nor do we bake the cake, and most likely we rent out the hall. But when you watch everybody else practice their spiritual system or observe their holidays, they immediately are the benefactors of the same. And these are things that we're gonna have to take into consideration, because I wrote my own language. I created my own language. People have to speak this language in our community. They say, who does he think he is? He's trying to create a cult. And I say that when you hear the language that people speak, it intimates or alludes to the people that have conquered them. And if we're talking about any form of sovereignty or having any type of autonomous control, the one thing that we can possibly have total control over and be practical is control of ourselves. And one of the prerequisite things to oppress a person or people is to strip them of their native tongue or language. When someone takes away your language, they take away your ability to communicate thoughts that are culturally bound and exclusive to the people. That helps empower them to grow. There are concepts and things that have transpired in our history that can never be communicated in English because there's no words that can represent it. So once we start speaking in another language, we're actually at loss for who and what we are. So maybe we have to learn older languages. But I'm here to say we shouldn't be afraid to be innovative. So if it takes for us to make a new language, we shouldn't ask what gives you the right. Because we don't want to have to argue over the dialect of Arabic we choose, or the dialect of Hebrew we choose. And then there still be the people that are the scholars that are more grammatically correct and in power to correct us. So maybe we don't want that. I come out of Brownsville, Brooklyn. People are mad at me. I drive a Rolls Royce. It's a $300,000 car. I live in Beverly Hills. I moved out of the hood. They call me all sorts of names. But for these events, I always pay my own way. I pay for my own people to come through. I pay to contribute. No one cares about that. But most of them won't know, because I normally don't speak about it. But I understand hip hop. I used to look on TV and see what these brothers and sisters had for material success. And I wanted it too, and nobody should be in here feeling guilty, because you come from a history that we often brag about, where we say that we have our inception in a part of the world that was the most abundant in organic and inorganic commodities, in contrast to everywhere else, where gold and diamonds and other precious metals and gems were as abundant as the fruits on trees. that create apples. So much so, it didn't even have value to us because it was so abundant. Our ancestors died with more gold on them in their caskets than we could ever conceive of having on right now while walking. But then we contemplate, what is this fixation or this infatuation we have as younger people with the shiny things in life? It's called epigenetics. It's dumped into our DNA. You have people who may not know it on a surface level, but on an unconscious level, on a genetic level, many of you are walking around as former kings and queens. And you cannot contemplate how to become complacent in poverty, because it's just not in your DNA to be a bum or be impoverished. So I like the nice things in life, and I'm not going to let no one make me feel guilty about it, because I know I'm down for this every day of the week, but I have to say these things first because someone will come back, but he moved to Beverly Hills, but I'm out here risking my life. I'm organizing Bloods and Crips all over. I'm polygynous in a de facto sense, which means I have multiple female counterparts. And in order for you to have a successful polygynous relationship, because I'm not encouraging people to do it, you must first be able to have a successful monogamous relationship. That's right. And when we talk about Illuminati, and when we talk about the bankers, when we talk about all these evil people, we have all these euphemisms that we use for them, but if we bring it down to the core, what are we talking about? We're talking about family. These are families. All these organizations are predicated upon bloodline. So families rule the world. So if you want black people to rule the world, we got to restore the family structure. Because everyone you talk about, whether they're the Rothschilds or the Rockefellers, you're talking about families. So in our community, one of our slogans is, love is law and family is business. You have to treat your family like a company. And when people want to have relationships with your children, you have to educate your children, like I do, to consider the fact that you must wonder, why does this person want to take on your family name? We don't want no one to desecrate our family name. We marry for power purposes, and only for power purposes. We don't just marry anyone into our family because we're working on empowering ourselves that much more from one generation to the next. So we find that there's a dichotomy to the words that we use often, that we say we beseech when it comes to engaging each other in relationships. We have to learn how to get together, and we have to start learning how to break apart too, healthy. So what are these words? Everybody, particularly women, they want a sense of security. They want trust. They want consideration. They want appreciation. They want bonding. They want sharing, right? All these words have an emotional context. It's an absolute fact. They want friendship. But prerequisite to that, we should embrace the economic renditions of those words. Because with that, it'll catalyze the emotional experience you're looking to have. What do I mean by that? If we go into the legal context of the word friend, a friend is one who is willing to invest in you, or one you're willing to invest in. So imagine if you applied that ethic. A friend is one who is willing to invest in you, or one you're willing to invest in. Imagine how much people's numbers you have to erase out of your phone. But think about this on another note. Imagine if you applied this methodology. Imagine if you said, I will only befriend somebody that I can benefit from, as well as them benefiting from me. Then we would be dealing with reciprocity, or what we call in ancient Kemetic science, ma'at, balance, order. It shouldn't be one-sided, because you'll wind up disliking that person later. So now we have friendship, but we want consideration. In business, what is consideration? When two parties identify something that is of worth or value. Let's say an asset, like a house. And they decide, we should go into business and make some money off of this house. I think we can make some money off of this. The man and the woman get together and say, I think we can make some money off this house. Let's go into contract and let's get this money. That's called consideration. When there's an incentive or motion between two parties that say we can benefit from this particular asset, let's go into contract. That's called consideration, the very thing that you want in relationships. And what happens when you rent that property out and you start making money? What is that called in economics? It's called appreciation. So we got friendship, we got consideration, we got appreciation, right? But we're going to hold this property in what? Trust. What is a trust? When property or something is held by one on behalf of another, and others may benefit. Beneficiaries. Children can inherit it. Why is inheriting wealth so important? Because this is a debt wealth society. All the essentials warrant the fact that you need debt. So if you want to get a college education, you have to go into debt student loan. You need a place to live, obviously, right? A house, right? They love you so much from pre-K to 12th grade, 14 years of school. You never had one real estate class, but they're preparing you for life, though. They're preparing you. So now when we take this into consideration, there go that word again. We say, okay, we need a house, but in order to get the house, you need a mortgage, or 30-year fixed rate mortgage. You have to go back into debt again. It's a debt wealth society. And guess what? If you want a car, you gotta go into debt again, right? But let's say you want to build credit. The number one way to build credit is to go into debt, to establish a credit profile. So how do you diffuse a debt wealth society system? By way of inherited wealth. The children have to inherit the very things that you go into debt for. If one generation makes the sacrifice, we won't be in this situation again. But that's going to take selfless acts of love, which is another conversation. So we're going to go back. We have friendship, we have consideration, we have appreciation, we have trust, and then we also need what? A security that represents the partnership. What is a security? A security is a paper certificate that attests to ownership and equity, as in the case of a stock, or ownership of a bond, as in the case of a debt obligation, which has tradable derivatives. Anything that has a Q-SIP on it alludes to it having, or someone being in debt, or someone making money off of you, like your birth certificate, like your death certificate, like a marriage certificate. So this means whether you're dying, you need someone's help and assistance to die, and someone's making money off of you. Whether being brought into this world, you need assistance to live, or even if you're getting together. And guess what? If you think you're going to get married and not pay your property taxes, it doesn't matter if that man is beating you down every day of the week. If you're not paying your property taxes, you're not allowed to divorce. Now, what part of your marriage did you agree to that stipulation? But you see, these certificates have Q-SIPs on it, which is a Committee on Uniform Securities Identification Procedure. The key word is security. And a security is a paper certificate that attests to ownership and equity, as in the case of a stock, or ownership of a bond, as in the case of a debt obligation, which has tradable derivatives. So all this merely means is what? When you go into business with your partner, in this particular case, man and woman, I presume, when you have these kind of relationships, now what you're saying is this, because we want to encourage business relationships with man and woman. This is how we're going to communicate in order to have this harmony. It's not, yo, I love brothers that have dark lips, says the sister. It looks like they smoke weed, right? Or the brothers be like, man, that's wifey material. And he's looking at her behind. Because what's going to happen is if you don't breed for brains, you're going to wind up with very beautiful black children that can't assimilate data. They'll be very ignorant, but beautiful nonetheless. And the last thing we need is more attractive idiots in our race. So now you have a security that attests to how much your contract or your covenant with your wife is worth. And in that, we know there's shares, there's bonding. Why is this important? Because in the trust, now we can do something very clever with this. You see, we like to do all the contracts when we're divorcing, but we should be doing it before, when we decide we're getting serious with each other. What does this mean? A man should say, you know what? You get this much percentage of this business. We may go in 50-50, but if we should have to part our ways, you can have 70% of what we work together in this particular business venture. Because this is called dowry in other cultures. So now you have another type of sense of security in its colloquial meaning. We have sharing your percentages of ownership. You have your bonding, okay, which is the debt obligation you have to each other. Just file a simple UCC1 financing statement and establish who the creditor and debtor is. Now you actually have a rendition of a marriage contract based on your business with each other. Now people say, you're monetizing your relationship, Polight. You're being a pimp. And I don't mind them saying that because I know they don't know better. So our only reference for this type of relationship amongst a man and a woman, or a man with multiple sisters, would be the perverse style, because we're not educated on African-centered relationships. So we don't know better. You understand what I'm saying? We don't know better. So first thing we think, is this pimping? That's the first thing that comes to mind. So yes, you should monetize your relationship because everybody else is. Everyone's making a living off of your divorces, a living off of your single parenthood, a living off of child support. Everyone else is monetizing your relationship. It's about time you start monetizing your relationship for the better good of yourself and your children. Now we can talk about whole life insurance policies, not just any life insurance policies, but whole life insurance policies. Insurance policies that you can borrow against. What does this mean? Most people's life insurance policy doesn't really benefit them until they die. It should be called a death insurance policy. But with whole life insurance, or you also have group, but that's another conversation, but whole life insurance you can borrow against the policy. What does this mean? You can actually purchase real estate, as an example, in real time, or even get some of the funds or the equity out of it to make certain types of investments. This is important. This is very important. Why you want life insurance? Think about this. Chinese, Jewish child, whoever, has both parents. One of them dies, but they've been continuously putting $150 up every month. Guess what happens when that parent dies? Child might get $250,000 in light of their death. Black child dies. If you say Polight, you're talking about using the system. That's the Crocker system. And sometimes you might have to suck from the titty of the oppressor. The milk ain't always sour. Until we can change the paradigm, you gotta start keeping it real. Don't let these people have you so-called black power 24/7 for so long that they trick you into making consciousness synonymous with poverty. Don't make them trick you. So what I'm saying is this, understand this. When other races' parents die, there's an inheritance, not only of the wealth, material assets that they establish, but the insurance policy giving them $250,000 upwards. And when a black child dies, they are at a $250,000 disadvantage per parent. You understand what I'm saying? And we're walking around here thinking that all of this is based on racism, but some of this, or a lot of this, is now based on just ignorance, or our teachers not properly communicating to us the ideas that should be prioritized. So every time one of our children has a parent that they lose, and another race has parents that they lose, our children are already $500,000, $1 million behind and more. So that's what they're being born into. How are they going to compete in society? Well, on average, all the other children are $1 million up over them. We have to take these things into consideration. And I'm 32, and I get heck. I'm in church, right? I get heck. Caught it. I almost said H-E double hockey sticks. I caught it. I get all sorts of heck from people who say they're conscious because of this type of conversation. But people are waking up. And my brothers from the gangs, they own their real estate. And they're following this program so we can make sure that if we break up with our black woman, You'd be surprised how child support would go down if we come into the relationship with something to offer the female other than the opportunity to make a baby with her.